sometimes when you have conflict in the family, it can feel like you're in an open minefield. And that sometimes the tensions and frustrations are such to the point that you know that you may say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, and then everything will explode. How many of you have felt like that? Felt like sometimes in the blended family, especially with the conflict, is that I'm stepping on mines. And if you understand anything about a mine, you don't know where they are. You don't know where those bombs are placed. And so any wrong step and it can just blow it up. And a lot of times in the blended family, that's how it feels. I remember early on in my blended family, that's how I felt. I felt a lot of times like if I say the wrong thing, something's going to blow up. We're going to be upset. We're going to get in an argument. And I'm pretty sure my husband felt the same way because we were trying to navigate this and trying to learn it. But I believe one of the issues that we were having is that we were trying to function as a traditional family. Blending a family is a huge transition. It's a huge transition, and it's a new journey for everybody. It's not something that you've been on before, and a lot of times you'll have tensions and emotions as you try to blend your family. And so to understand that that's a part of it and that's going to happen. And so today I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of those tensions that rise and some ways that we can make it less stressful and things that we can do. And so you have to remember that sometimes when we're having this conflict in the beginning, it's because we're still trying to operate as a traditional family. Another way we try to operate as a traditional family is we're expecting everybody to love everyone. Sometimes we expect it right away, but especially after that first year. Everybody should love everybody. That's the traditional family. When you get into your family, that love is there. That bond is there. But when a step parent, especially if the kids come there at like 8 or 9 years old, that bonding hasn't taken place. And so we're trying to force things that haven't happened yet. And so we need to be aware of that. When we're talking about conflict with the kids, sometimes they don't know where they fit, or they may feel that they have loyalties to their bio parent. We may automatically tell them, start calling them mom, start calling them dad. Well, they feel loyalty to their biological parent. And so now we're putting them in an uncomfortable position. So one of the first things that you need to do in this situation is ask people, what is it that you would like to do? Would you like to call a person this? Would you like to call a person that? And ask them, do you feel comfortable doing this? Do you feel comfortable doing that? Because if not, that's one way you can start having conflict with the stepchildren, is because they're feeling like they're being forced to do certain things. I know in my blended family, right away, I asked my husband, what do you want the kids to call you? And he didn't feel comfortable with them calling him dad because he was still trying to navigate his role in his kids' life now that he wasn't living with them. And so he said he didn't feel comfortable with them calling him dad. And I respected that because I didn't feel comfortable with the kids calling me mom. Now, I know everyone's different and that's okay. But for us, we felt comfortable enough not to have those titles on because we were still trying to navigate where we fit. And then by doing that, the kids didn't feel that they had to do something that they weren't ready to do. Okay, so the way to alleviate tension is to just go ahead and let that naturally evolve of how the person, how the child, the parent wants to be in the relationship. The next thing, it's so important for the parent to remain, the bio parent to remain the disciplinarian. And I know and with my clients, I get a lot of pushback over this because especially if the kids live with them, I'm not going to let kids tell me what to do. I'm not going to let kids think they can do whatever they want to do. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to allow that bio parent to be the one to discipline the kids and to be the one to actually tell the kids what to do. Because think about it, that bio parent has the bond. You don't. And naturally, if someone comes up to you and try to tell you what to do, there's going to be a pushback. I'm also a special ed teacher, and one of the things that I've seen a lot is that when we had a substitute teacher, and the substitute teacher would come in and try to act like the regular teacher and discipline the kids and tell them what to do and make little snide remarks and comments, the kids would push back. They're like, who are you? You're not my teacher. And I'm not saying that the kids were doing it in a disrespectful way. I'm saying that that bond hadn't been established. So things that the regular teacher could say to the kids, the substitute teacher couldn't say. And so when the teacher would come back from wherever she was at on vacation or whatever, the kids would tell her, yeah, the sub came and she tried to tell us this and tried to tell us that. But they didn't have that bond, so the kids didn't receive it. And that's what it's like with the step parents. It's like you can't come in trying to tell the kids and act as their parent, they may not receive it. And I know some of this may come back from years ago when kids were, whatever you told them to do, they were supposed to do it. But it's not like that anymore. I remember talking to my mom one time, and she's an educator also. And she was telling me that when she was teaching, the kids would sit down and they would be quiet and they would be ready for their lessons. I told her, Ma, it's not like that anymore. Kids are different. You have to use a different technique. You can't use that same technique that you used years ago. And that's how it is in the blended family. You can't use the same traditional roles or use what you did in a traditional family with the kids. You have to do something different because these are kids that have a bond with a bioparent, and you're trying to get that bond. That bioparent knows their child. They know what words you could say that will get the child upset. They know what you could do that's going to get the child upset. And so they can sit down with the step parent and say, well, no, that really won't work with them. And so it's very important to make sure that the biological parent, is the one that does the disciplining or the one that presents things to the child. Otherwise, it could cause a disaster, especially in the first 1 to 5 years in the blended family relationship. Another way to reduce conflict with your stepchildren is to make sure that you continue to do what you did with them before you united with that person. Meaning, make sure you spend time with your biological children. Don't try to make everything like we're one big happy family and all of our activities have to be done together. Spend time with your partner and their kids, and then spend time with your kids separately, because the kids need to know that they still have that normalcy with you. If you read to your kids before they went to bed at night, continue to read to them. If you took let's say took them to play baseball or throw the ball with them, continue to do that. You want to continue to keep that bond with your children. Otherwise, they'll feel like because we have this new partner, now all of a sudden everything has changed. I remember in my blended family early on, once again, we were trying to function like a traditional family. Every time my bonus kids came over, we all had to do things together. And we all had, because we had to have this cohesiveness, this family system going. But sometimes I didn't want to do things with all of the kids. And sometimes they probably didn't want to do things. They came over to spend time with their dad. But when you try to push it and make we're all going to spend time together, that's when you may start getting that kickback of, well, I don't want to do it. Now you got this battle going on where it can be, you know what, I'm just going to spend time with my kids and we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's not saying that you're dividing. It's saying that you're keeping that cohesiveness, that bond that you develop with your kids. And it's evolving. And eventually you'll be able to just, do things all together. But in the beginning, you need to let them know that you still care and love for them, and that bond is still there with them. Now, some people, they don't agree with that concept. But remember, I'm talking about kids 1 to 5 years in a blended family relationship. They're used to spending time with their mom or dad. They're used to that quality time. Now they've brought a partner on and they don't have that quality time anymore. They feel like it's been taken away from them. Because remember, you decided to get into this relationship. They didn't have to say so. They didn't have a voice in it. They didn't have a vote. You decided to get with someone, and now all of a sudden their whole world is turned upside down. And that's a segue into the next thing that we have to consider, is that the losses that the children are having. When we don't consider the losses, that creates conflict. One of the losses is their whole life, how their life was before, it's gone. If it was them living in a house with you, now all of a sudden they don't live in a house with just you anymore. They have to split their time. Or if they're living with you and they have to split their time now with their mom, that they didn't have to do that before. Or maybe they didn't live together anyway, but when they did spend time, it was just them and their dad. Now they have to spend their time with their dad and you. So you have to think about what has happened in this child's life, what has transpired in their life, what's different about their life. A lot of times we don't consider what's really going on with the child. All we know is as an adult, I'm here, they're not respecting me, they need to do XYZ, they're not doing it, they're having a behavior, but we're not sitting down thinking what's going on with that child. A lot of times, children are dealing with grief. They're dealing with grief because now maybe their parent has passed, and they didn't have the time to grieve because maybe their mom or dad went out and gotten another relationship. So now they're expected to look at this person as their mom or dad, and they haven't had a chance to grieve them. It's all of those little things that you have to consider when you're in the blended family relationship, or else it will cause conflict. I remember in my early on in my relationship, my husband, he lived with his children. And then when he divorced, that was a big gap. He was not there anymore. And so I can tell you, I didn't consider the losses. I didn't consider the losses that the kids had. I didn't consider the loss of the routine. Everything changed because one of the things that happens a lot of times is in-laws. They have an opinion about things. And so now where everyone was happy, it seemed like now they had a fractured family. And so for them, they didn't know what was going on. No one sat down and talked to them. And that's one of the things I encourage is for you to have someone talk to the kids, whether it's in coaching or counseling. Talk to the kids, make sure that they're doing okay. A lot of times we just automatically assume that the kids are great, they're fine because they're not exhibiting a behavior, but there's things that's going on the inside. And that communication has to be had with the child to see what's going on. Another thing to consider when we're looking at conflict with the kids is to look at their age. Younger children will do mostly whatever you say. You say, go clean your room. They may, do I have to, but they'll go clean the room. When the kids become teenagers, they want to have a dialogue about it because they've realized that they can kind of maneuver. And if there's a loophole, if there's a gray area, because teenagers, they see that gray area, they want to talk about that. And they want to, it appears to be to argue, but to know that that's part of their development of independence. Whether they were in the blended family or not, they would try to get their own independence because that's a part of that developmental age. In my blended family relationship, when my daughter became a teenager, that's when I started seeing this pushback. I started seeing this questioning. And so for my husband, he looked at it as she's not listening to me. Well, it's not so much that she's not listening to you, but that she's trying to establish her own independence. And a lot of times we forget that that's what's happening with the kids at that age. But what I tell my clients is try to remember at that age, what did you want to do? At that age, how did you feel when someone told you what to do versus if they asked you or gave you a choice? And that's one of the things that you can do with teenagers is give them a choice. Well, which one do you want? Sort of like you did when the kids were little. Which one would you want? Do you want to wear the blue sweater or the red sweater? And when kids feel that they can choose, they feel empowered. They feel that they can make the choice. And so they don't have as much conflict. And so that's one of the things that we want to do when the kids become teenagers is we want to help them to be empowered, but also we want to get established that they still have to follow the rules. And so again, with my daughter, that was the conflict with her and my husband is because she was trying to establish her own independence. And he looked at it as her being defiant. But again, whether he lived with his kids, he would have saw the same thing because they were giving their biological mom a lot of the same problems. But because they didn't live with us, sometimes if your child doesn't live with you, you don't see those same things. And so just to remember that the biological age and I mean the developmental age that they're going through, that's going to also may appear to have a may appear to be a conflict, but it really may be the developmental age. Okay? And so you have to know when to engage and when to disengage. And that's why I say it's going to be very important for that biological parent to be the one to do the disciplining. Because here you have a child that they're a teenager, they're already going through that developmental age, and now you're trying to tell them what to do. They're not going to listen to you. So you have to know when to disengage. And disengage, all it means is just stepping back. You and your partner can have that conversation behind closed doors about what you liked, what you didn't like, but to allow the child to express themselves at that developmental age, and then let that bio parent be the one to engage with them. So now I just want to talk about ways to create that bond with them, ways to create a bond with your child, because as you create that bond, it will alleviate some of those conflicts that you're having with them. There is an analogy that I use a lot with my clients. It's called the emotional bank account. The emotional bank account. And just think about that. A bank account, it has money in it. You can either make withdrawals or you can make deposits. And a lot of times we're making withdrawals and we're not making deposits. Think about deposits as when you make deposit, that means you're getting closer and closer to your bonus child, your stepchild. When you're making withdrawals, you're actually getting further and further away from them. And so how do I make this emotional connection with them, which is the deposits? Well, one of the first things I said is when you allow that bio parent to be the one to discipline, the one to talk to them, that's one way that you're making the emotional deposit, because you're not looked at as the villain. You're not looked at as the one that's causing the problems. And so that's one way to make an emotional deposit. Another way to make an emotional deposit is to use intentional behavior. Intentional behavior is just what it says, doing things on purpose, intentional. So when you're talking to them, make sure you're intentionally asking them, okay, what would you like to do? Getting their input. Intentionally helping them feel that they do have a voice. Because one of the things with kids is sometimes they feel powerless, like they don't have a voice in the situation. Remember I said earlier, you decided to get with that person, they didn't have a voice. But now you want them to have a voice. You want them to feel empowered. And so when you and your partner are making decisions that the child can have an opinion on, invite them in. Say, for instance, you're trying to decide, okay, where do we go for a vacation? Now, you may choose the vacation, but they certainly can choose some of the activities on vacation. So if trying to find ways where they can be empowered and that you can make those have those intentional behaviors so you can make those deposits in their lives. When we're talking about reducing conflict, one of the things that the children that I've worked with that they said was, I don't feel like anyone's listening to me. I don't feel like my opinion matters. No one cares what I think. And so that's one thing that you don't want your kids to feel, because if they feel you're not listening to them, then of course there's going to be that kickback. If they feel like I don't matter. So you have to use that intentional behavior and also make sure that you're communicating with them. Noticing things. When you notice that they're quiet, when you're noticing that, they're not their usual upbeat self, just inquire and say, hey, what's going on? Again, with my children, my son was the quiet one. He rarely would say anything, but when I noticed his behavior would change, that's when I'd say, hey, what's going on? And of course, he would say nothing, but I would probe a little bit because, again, I had that bond with him and I had that connection. So he would open up to me and he would tell me what was going on. And then if it was something with the blended family issue, I would go back and share it with my husband. Because for him to try to get our son to open up, it wasn't going to happen. Not early on in the relationship. It had to be something that was done by the bio parent. With the step parents, you have to realize, again, that this is not like the traditional family. And that's quickly you have to get that in your mind and understand that things are going to be different. Whereas with your when your child was born, like with my daughter and my son, when they were born, I had authority and I was the one that made all the decisions. And so I didn't have to talk to anyone else. But once I got in a blended family, things changed. I wasn't the only one that made decisions with their lives. And so in the blended family, that's something that you have to understand quickly. Some of my clients, I've heard them make statements like, well, no one's going to tell me what to do in my house. Well, no one's telling you what to do in your house. But if you have a stepchild or a bonus child, like I like to call the children, and their biological parent is still living that lives outside the home, they absolutely will have something to say. They absolutely will have an influence. And when you think that I'm the only one that can talk about or say anything about what goes on in the family, that's going to create conflict with you and that other parent, and thereby the kids may feel a certain way about that. You write the comments or the questions in there, and I'll make sure to answer it. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Enjoy the rest of your day.